Hi everyone, how are you doing today? This is going to be another very brief video. I just wanted to do a little ramble here on something that has crossed my path recently, and that is the subject of what is worthwhile reading, what is reading that you ought to have as a steady diet. So there were two things that kind of inspired this thought. One, I was at a recent gathering of locals in my area, and we were talking about, things that were going on in our lives, and I mentioned I was reading A Farewell to Arms by Hemingway, and I had previously mentioned at this group that I'd been reading Huxley and so on, and one of the people there just remarked that I must do a lot of heavy reading or something like that. Like, I tend to read books that seem on the heavier side for, I guess, most people. So, classic literature, just things that are maybe not on the well-beaten path as far as summer reading. And that's not the most uncommon response I get when I share my reading preferences with others. And I think sometimes I almost feel this awkwardness of bringing up my reading when I know that other people aren't reading in the same spaces. As an example, I've tried going to some other book clubs and things and always feel like I'm kind of the odd one out reading these heavy books. And And not in a way that I even intend to be, bragging about it or anything. It's not that at all. It's just that's what I read and that's what I enjoy. And so it's kind of interesting to get that response. And then I was watching a video by Heather Reeds. I'm going to link to her video in the description. She's doing this wonderful series on Middlemarch, a book that I did not finish last year. But I'm heartily enjoying her commentaries on it, and she's going through it a lot more slowly and really digging into the cultural references that Eliot is making in Middlemarch. And this one video where she talks about the heroine's uncle, so Dorothea Brooke's uncle, and how he has all of these books, and if I remember correctly, he's really into art as well. Like, he's this well-traveled guy, has all these art pieces and books in his collection, but he doesn't really have like a systematic kind of approach to it. It's not just even that he's not systematic, but he doesn't seem to have taken a great deal out of it. If you remember from the beginning of Middlemarch, he's kind of trying to get into politics a bit, trying to balance his relations between the different people of his parish and figuring out, okay, how can I kind of make progress politically, but not, tread on too many toes, which turns out to be a difficult enterprise. But point being, he has all these books and things, and it is questionable how much he gets from them, since he is not able to really give Dorothea the kind of guidance that she needs, and which ultimately contributes to her naivety and her challenges in finding a life that's good for her as a young woman in this time period. So that's kind of the backstory there. And so Heather was asking the question, maybe is this Eliot commenting on the relation of books and reading to our interactions with people? And could it be, it's just a question, that the way we relate to books says something about the way we relate to people, I think is kind of how she put it. And I thought that was such a fascinating question. And I think it really it gets into two things. One is what ought we to read, right? And what ought to be the purpose of reading, if you can talk about it as an ought, which I'll get to in a minute. And then the other question is, well, maybe you're reading the right things even, but are you gleaning from them what you want to glean from them? Or are you just kind of absorbing them and then not getting much from them? And I think this is a really tricky question. I remember when I started reading as a young child, I obviously did not pick up on everything in the books I was reading, and I was absorbing them very much for the story. But through that, there were a lot of deeper themes that became apparent to me. So as I grew older, I started to get into that more, and then, studying literature formally even pulled out more themes. So I wouldn't write off just reading in that way, even for entertainment, because I do believe that a great piece of literature, even if it's merely entertaining to you, can still rub off on you a lot of its themes and its messages. And if not that, then, something about the characters that draws you to them, that makes you think about how people relate to each other and the kinds of challenges they face and the kind of sacrifices they make. So I personally think that you can read for entertainment and still get something out of it if the book has those layers. So even if you're not looking for the layers, I think you can still get quite a bit out of it. So I guess first thing I would say is, layers. Like, does the book have that kind of depth? Now you might say, well, how do I know if it has that kind of depth? And truly, there's many a book that's been overrated, in my opinion, that, others have said, oh, there's tons and tons of layers here. And maybe they're right, and maybe I'm wrong. I do think there is value in looking around and seeing what the community has said about something. Not just the community, but like over time. And that's part of what makes classic literature so powerful, is that typically a lot of people over a long period of time have found layers and value in it. So that's kind of a clue there as to something that you could benefit from, even if you're just reading it in a more casual setting. So that would be one thing I would suggest. I think that the other thing that I would suggest is relating literature to other things in life. So that can be art, other types of art. It can be history. How does the book fit in the time that it was written? How do people relate to it today through the lens of events that have taken place since that time period, and maybe change the way we view that time period? I would also say that your personal experience cannot be undervalued here, because I think that reading is very much a personal experience, and two different people can read Middlemarch, say, or any other book, and find different things in it as different people at different times of life. And I don't think that there's like a right way or a wrong way to read something, in as much as you are actually looking at the text that the author wrote and gleaning something from it. Like, okay, it might be wrong to read a book and say the author said this and they actually didn't say that. That's just kind of common sense, right? But your own personal experience, your own culture can impact that, and that's fine. That's to be expected. It really is, I think, a very important part of the reading experience. So to that end, a lot of us maybe grew up as bookworms that were very, like that was our escapism, that was our adventure, that was our life. And then as you get older, or as you read more, maybe you feel inspired to go out and do more things. So I really do think that it's important to, not only apply your personal experience while you're reading, but to go seek experiences to get a bigger picture of the world. And that will actually impact your reading and perhaps help you find some of those layers that are there. So doing things, can't be underestimated. Doing things for others, not just for yourself, right? So not just maybe, it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful to travel. It's wonderful to experience great pieces of art and literature, concerts, all those sorts of things. But then doing things for others also unlocks layers of experience that you wouldn't have had if you just did things for yourself. Because typically when you're doing something for others, you have to make some kind of sacrifice of time, of attention, of empathy. So there's actually a lot here that I think can really give your reading more depth. So something to think about if you feel like maybe your reading life's a little dull, maybe you're not really connecting with it. You might think about doing something completely different, but then seeing how that might tie back to your reading in the future. Just a thought. And on the note of personal experience too, I think that ought to humble us all, and to realize that just because you're reading heavy books doesn't mean that you are some kind of special person, right? Going back to Dorothea's uncle, who was very proud of his travels and his books and everything, if he didn't derive great value from them, or if they didn't leave much of a mark upon his person, he has really very little to brag about. And I just think that, an attitude of humility is important. And realizing that you are a very little fellow in the big world after all, as Gandalf puts it. Just being aware of that. And honestly, I think that's like really huge, because when I go to these groups or whatever and people ask me what I read, maybe like that's also part of it, right? I don't want to be spouting out that I'm reading these books of philosophy or political science or whatever. I don't want them to think I'm showing off, because it's really not about that. And so I think the more you focus on how little you know and how much you can learn from your reading, the less that's going to play into how you describe your reading. I think that'll just shine through. So you can think about, your learning as something you can share with others, but not in a way that's bragging, not in a way that is elitist. The more you can distill it down for people and help them see the kernels of truth, or the kernels of brilliance, whatever it might be, then whether they end up reading the book or not, whether they end up becoming classics fans like we are or not, they've gained something from your reading, as it should be, right? So that's so powerful, because you've taken a deceased author's ideas, absorbed them through the lens of your experience, and also conveyed what the author was describing in their text to somebody else who is now receiving that message from that author through you. And like, their world gets a little bit bigger when you do that. So I just think that's so cool. And there's ways you can do that, again, that are not bragging or even humble bragging. Like, if you can connect it to something in the present, or something that is relevant to you in your life, in their life, then you've immediately shown how practical it is to read classics, and it's not just something you do because you're, trying to be superior to others or anything like that. And so this whole process, right? I think just doing this process, you'll get more out of the book for sure. As they say, it's like the classic advice they give to people is, if you can teach somebody else something, then that shows that you actually know it. So that's going to be your homework that shows that you've gotten something out of it. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Let me know your thoughts. I kind of like doing shorter videos like this, but I didn't plan to do this one. It was just a couple things lined up to kind of inspire me to talk about this. So shout out to Heather. Check out her channel and let me know what you think. And take care. See ya.